I'm Jack Carswell, and I appreciate all of you guys coming. This is an event that is a part of a series of events. We, the Historical Society and the Aucilla Research Institute, acquired a $5,000 grant from the State Humanities Council to put these events on. We've had the first one Buck Bird and I did several years ago. The next one Cindy Littlejohn did, and the one after that John Finlayson has done, and I think we're in for a real treat. The idea here is to get a record of oral history from the people and their families who founded this county or this part of Florida, and then we can archive it at the state library, and we'll be able to archive it at the Historical Society. We hope to have a number of representatives of our community. I don't see any African American people here, but we have a number of those people who talk about their family, how they got here, and what the stories that they bring forward. I've told this story to a number of people before, and my grandmother told me when she was a kid, her mother would go down to Monticello River hunting, fishing with the men. The women went and camped for a month. And when they were down there, the men had taken their dogs and they were going bear hunting. People in those days ate bear because it had a lot of grease, I guess is what it had in it. So the men suited up, cleaned their rifles and frisked around and went off with the dogs. And they were gone all day, and when they came back, they hadn't seen a bear, nor had they killed a bear. But there was a bear hanging up and being butchered in the camp because the lady shot the bear who intruded into the camp. So the interesting part of that, and the reason we want the oral histories, is because that gives you some context in terms of what life was and what it was like. One thing you know, that the ladies could shoot. You know they knew how to butcher the bear. You knew that they were competent and sturdy in themselves, because when the bear showed up, they got the gun, shot it, and hung it up and butchered it. So when the guys came back, it was a done deal. So those kind of stories that all of us have, we hope to record and make them part of the history. I've gotten so old, I can remember when we had wood stoves and oil lamps and stuff, but all of that life is passing away. And our idea is to record that so that historians have more than academic text to research. And tonight we are super lucky. I'm going to let somebody else introduce him. I'll tell you, this is Turnbull Anderson. And if you look at a history of Jefferson County, you can hardly turn a page that you won't find somebody who is kin to the Andersons and to Turnbull. They were all over this county. They were among the founding families. And I'm going to ask David Ward to introduce him, because he's sort of Turnbull's area. I've already had 2 girlfriends the time they were born. So where did David go?
I'm over here.
Okay, so and David is kind of a contemporary of Mr. Anderson here.
Mr. Anderson died in 1999.
Jack did invite me to introduce Turnbull Anderson. Just to give you a little frame of reference, I was in the 7th grade when he was a senior in high school, and I remember him well because that football team at Jefferson that he was a starter on won the first state championship that had ever been won here, and my idea of having a good class was that my class was going to be the second one that won the state championship, and damn it was the class right after us that won it. wasn't our class, but I've known Turnbull all my life. His father, Turney, was a county commissioner here in Jefferson County. His mother, Mary Liz, was one of my teachers in high school, and Turnbull has been a successful farmer. He's been a nurseryman. And he, like me, just never quite left. So he's a Vietnam veteran here. He's lived a good full life. His wife Diane is here, and he's got relatives here that are going to keep him in line. He can't tell too many far-fetched stories. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Turnbull Anderson, and we can hear the truth about his family here. Thank you.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is I had an uncle, great uncle, Sigsbee Scruggs. He was an attorney down in Gainesville, and a very flamboyant attorney. Trial lawyer, everything. Anything he could do to win the case. That was Sigsbee, Uncle Sig. Felix Johnson, who was the judge here, went to law school at Florida. He graduated from law school, and Uncle Sig gave the commencement address. Felix told me it was the shortest commencement address he had ever in the history of Florida Law School. My uncle came in there and he said, I want to tell y'all, number one is get the money. Number two is remember, always remember, you're not on trial. So at the end of the day, win, lose, or draw, you're not the ones going to jail. And number three is get the money. And turned around and walked off and said, I promise not to be that brief. But, and another thing too is I don't want Claudette McRae to kick me off of the thing for the Historical Society like they did my cousin Ike Anderson. Ike Anderson was a local attorney, mayor of Monticello, city councilman, all that kind of stuff, but he was very active in the Historical Association when they had the tour of homes. Well, some of y'all remember Ike was a very flamboyant person too. He is a big personality. And these people, after the tour of homes, kept coming up to Esther Conley, who was in charge of the Historical Society back then, and said, we sure do enjoy Mr. Anderson's. Said, but I went back a later time and he was at a different house. He told an entirely different story. And come to find out, Ike was making up all kinds of stuff about these houses he was in. And when Esther Conley found out about it, she fired him and wouldn't let him be on the tour anymore. So I don't want to get fired tonight. Another thing is I see a cousin and probably some other kin folks in the audience, and I won't dwell on the Andersons too much because the Andersons, there's still a lot of Andersons in Jefferson County. And I don't want to get kicked out of the clan. But first of all, I'd like to say my name is William Turnbull Anderson, Jr. And the reason I got stuck with Turnbull is because there were already several William and Bill Andersons in the family, older than I am. So I got stuck with Turnbull, and I really didn't like it, especially when I was off at college and I was trying to make a collect phone call home, and I said, who's the call from? Turnbull Anderson. They could never get it straight. Never got my name straight. But the older I got, the more I appreciate the name, and if you listen to some of the stuff I've got here, our families were big on family names. Like my grandmother was Lois Parkhill Turnbull. And my granddaddy was Milton Moore Anderson Sr. There were a lot of family names put in there, especially for middle names. So anyway, I grew up here in Jefferson County. I was born in Thomasville because it was the closest hospital. I've always hated that fact because both of my parents were born in Florida, and all my daughters were born in Florida. And back when you used to be able to go out of the country, especially like to Canada, all you had to do is state what state you were born in. And my dad would go Florida, my mom would go Florida, and I'd sit back and go Georgia. Anyhow, I grew up here, graduated from Jefferson County High School back in a long time ago in '67. And Jack, if I last till the end of the month, I'll be 75. I think that's a pretty good milestone right there, you know. But anyway, I had a great education. I had a great family. And like David said, my daddy was a farmer. He was a long-term county commissioner. My mother taught school, retired from the public school in Jefferson County, taught history, taught me English in junior high, and then followed me to high school and taught me history in high school. And one class I had to study for, I could not make anything but an A. Now, she would just be beside herself, you know, and never help. My mother would help students in her class. And she'd give these tests, and she'd walk down that aisle, and she'd look over there, and if it was me sitting there, she'd just shake her head and walk on by, not say anything. But if she got somebody, Mom would tap that paper, said, "You sure you want to use that as an answer?" You know, but that's the kind of teacher she was. She was tough on me, but she was a good teacher and a good mother. As a young boy, I grew up out on the family farm, out on what is now Turnbull Anderson Road. And I grew up in a house with 5 adults. My grandmother, my granddaddy, my Aunt Wilhelmina Anderson, and my mother and daddy. And being the only boy and the only child, well, you can imagine how spoiled I was. And I've enjoyed being spoiled and being an only child all my entire life until my mother got old. Then I wish I had a sister. I would not wish for another brother because he'd just be just as sorry as I was, you know. But I did wish that I had a sister. But grew up on the farm, plenty of cows, plenty of horses, dogs, cats, pigs, everything. And I think that's one reason that when you grow up like that, you develop an imagination. You've got to play by yourself a lot of times, you know. So you've got to think about things and all, you know. But it was a good life. It was a good growing up. But I'll tell you what, I wasn't going to go back to it because we didn't have a telephone until 1959. And it was a party line. And then also the first television set, my Aunt Wilhelmina had gotten married and she was in South Carolina. She came down and brought my grandmother a television set. It's about this big, rabbit ears. My grandmother didn't like it. She didn't want it till she got to watching it. And she found it. She loved baseball. She loved Baltimore Orioles. And back then you couldn't get but Channel 6 and maybe Albany, which was Channel 10. Then she got 2 televisions. One she kept on Channel 6, and one she kept on Channel 10, so you wouldn't mess them up. And if she got angry with one of them, the old antennas would be like twisted up in knots. And the TV repairman at that time was John Halpin. And he knew her voice. She'd go, "Halpin, my TV's messed up. You need to come fix it for me." He'd know exactly where to come and who it was talking. So he'd come out and fix her TV for her. But my grandfather, Milton Moore Anderson Sr., he died when I was about 8 years old. And I was very fortunate to know him because he was a very kind, very good man. And my grandmother, she lived to be 83, so I got to spend a lot of time with her. She died in 1973. And then my parents, old Turney, he died in 1999, and Mama passed away in 2012. But I want to tell you a little story here about my daddy and his sense of humor. Back in those days, you had W.G. Miller Hardware over here. You had Beavis Furniture Company, and all the John Locke Shoe Store had all these little old family stores and all. Well, they were always playing jokes on each other. Well, it seems like I had accumulated about 30-something cats around the house. And my daddy decided that that was way too many cats. So, and I'm the only one that could catch them. So he brought me 2 of these crates that held like tobacco plants, because we were growing tobacco at that time. And so he said, you can keep 4. So I filled the 2 crates up with cats. Daddy came to town, and right up here a couple of blocks, right behind W.G. Miller's store, he turned all those cats loose. And they went everywhere. They went in Beavis's Furniture, they went in Glenn's store, they went up to John Locke's shoe store and were climbing up on there knocking shoes and all off. And boy, you talk about some mad people. If I could just catch whoever it was that put Turney, you know who it was? No, I don't know who that was, you know. But I guarantee you that was one of the starts of all the Monticello town cats. They came from the country. All right, and that's kind of his. He had a kind of a different sense of humor, but kind of like some of us do, and David does. But anyhow,
Was Coon Anderson involved?
no, Coon was not involved. He was not a kin. He was an import some kind of way. Although he was a character for sure, gave me my first haircut. But anyhow, as my mother taught school up there at Jefferson, and like I say, she taught me and taught some of y'all in the audience, and taught with some of y'all in the audience. So then when she retired, they moved down to St. George Island, but they would come home. Well, when they first moved down, they'd come home about every weekend. And the longer they stayed down there, it got to be once a month. Then it would be like once every 2 months. Then Daddy would come home, they'd come home, and he'd look around the farm. He said, well, like, you got everything going good here today, so I want to go turn around and go right back. So they'd wouldn't spend but one night. But that was all right. Now, going a little deeper with my grandmother, Lois Parkhill Turnbull, her mother was William Bellamy. And the reason she was named William Bellamy, she was christened Teresa Bellamy. But her daddy died when she was like 2 years old. Weren't going to be any more. So they named her in his honor. And everybody called her Aunt Willie. And she's buried in Roseland right up here by her husband, Junius Turnbull, my great-grandfather. And his father was Dr. Theodore Turnbull that lived down here south of town on a plantation called Sunrise. And he was a doctor. And he was like a circuit riding doctor. He was like a circuit preacher, but he carried all the medicine in his saddlebags. He rode a horse. He would come into town, and then he would doctor all down to St. Mark's and all, you know, spend the night and all. And he did a lot of research on yellow fever. He was the first one to use quinine as a treatment. And my cousin Beth Anderson Harper, she still got some of his little medical deals, you know. All right, so we're back we're actually back to, it goes back to the Bellamy side of the family. She was William Bellamy. And her daddy was William Bellamy, and he was married to, I can't remember her name, but she's M. Hughes. That was her mother, was my grandmother's cousin. She was a Simpkins. And the Bellamys actually got here in around 1824 to 1827. And Captain Jack Bellamy, he came down from South Carolina, as many of my ancestors did, and he settled over around Jacksonville, actually in St. Augustine. And his son, oldest son, Abram Bellamy, was a lawyer. And he was a surveyor by profession. He helped lay out the city of Jacksonville, the streets and all. And he received land here in Jefferson County. And then he was chosen to build part of the old St. Augustine to Pensacola Road, which is the first U.S. highway in the state of Florida. And for that, he received more land and was able to buy more land. But they only cut those stumps off about a foot high from the ground. And a lot of times the wagons would hit one of those stumps. I think Captain Jack had a blacksmith shop somewhere down there around Volcano somewhere where he was cashing in on repairing the wagons and all. But of course back then it was whatever it took to get the coon. You did whatever it took to live, to survive and all. But my family has been around here probably, I am the last direct descendant of Captain Jack Bellamy to own any of the original Bellamy plantation. So I'm probably a 6th generation. You know, I know John Finlayson, he claims he's a 5th generation, but he's so much older than I am. That's the reason. You know, his sons are 6th generation. And I also hate to follow him because he's such a good speaker, and he's been doing it for so many years longer than I have. You know, and plus he's a good person. But how am I handling? How's the time going here? Is there any? Yeah, let's get to that. I just want to know how I'm standing here. I don't want to be too long and don't want to be too brief. All right, so let's go way back to the 1300s in a town called Stirling, Scotland. There lived a man in Stirling, Scotland named William of Rule, the Rule being a river in Scotland on the border between Britain and the wilderness in there. Bad place to be at that time. And William of Rule, they didn't have last names. He was called William of Rule for the river. And he was not a nobleman, but he was associated with noblemen. And he happened to be on a hunt with the king, who was Robert the Bruce. And they were hunting these wild bulls in, I believe it's the Caledonian forest. And these animals are not like our bulls. They were a lot smaller. They had a lot of hair on them. They claimed that all the hair on them, they looked like a lion almost. They had real sharp horns. And when you went into the woods in pursuit of one of these wild cows or wild bulls, they didn't run from you. They ran to you. And they were going to get you if they could. So here we've got the king, and he's got his spear, and he's surrounded by all these people. And they wound this bull. They don't kill him. They don't put him down. And the king is unarmed now. And the bull is coming for the king. So my ancestor intercepted that bull, took him by the horns, and brought him to the ground until the other hunters that had spears could come and dispatch that bull. So Robert the Bruce knighted him on the spot. And when it was time for him to rise, he said, "Arise, Sir Turn-y Bull." And the Turn-y Bull has been shortened to Turnbull over the years. There were several other names that are associated with the clan. My grandmother told me this story when I was a little boy, but I thought it was just a story. I didn't think, but it's actually true. And to show you, here's a picture of him turning the bull. Now, he was not an immodest person. His family crest was "Fortune favors the bold." And it was surrounded by these Gaelic knots, who are a symbol of strength and unity all around the thing. And of course, it was in Latin, but I can't, I'm rusty on my Latin. But "Fortune favors the bold" is what the deal was. And then another one, he had a shield that said, "I saved the king." So he was not a modest person. He let his light shine. But that was the Turnbull is the first documented name that we know of. So that's pretty unique in itself right there. And I am a member of the Turnbull clan. And the Turnbulls have been in here since the colonies. They came over, a lot of them did. A lot of them went down around New Smyrna Beach and tried to start a colony down there. They were Greek, Italians, and Minorcans. But that deal didn't work. And the ones that survived actually moved back up to St. Augustine. And there's still a large Minorcan community in Jacksonville, in that area around there. But they came over with one of my ancestors. And of course, I could talk on and on. What else? There was something else that I want to say. I told about the cats, and I told about Ike being kicked off the tour, and I told about Uncle Sig being short on his address, and what else? Oh, I know what. I wanted to say that growing up in that old farmhouse of ours out there, there was two things that were happening to you. One, you were either burning up in front of the fireplace on one side only, or the other thing is you were in bed and you were covered up under all those blankets and everything, and you were hot. You were burning up there, and you were burning up in front of the fireplace. And when you got out of bed in the morning and hit those oak floors, they were double oak floors, and they didn't have any carpet on them, and your feet hit that floor, I'm telling you, you were hot-footed it right to one of those fireplaces. And that house was heated there was a double fireplace between my grandmother and granddaddy's bedroom and the dining room. And then in the living room and the front bedroom, there was a double fireplace. And like I say, we graduated from that. We went up to gas space heaters. Terrible. But, that's what we had. High ceilings, 12-foot ceilings, 14-foot ceilings, I always wanted, when it came Christmas time, they wanted to know, what kind of Christmas tree you want? I want a cedar. I want a red cedar. And my grandfather Reams grew them on his farm over there in Greenville, and they were big, so you had to cut the whole tree down and then cut one to size to fit. But I wanted one that would touch the ceiling. That was one of my prerequisites. My Christmas tree had to touch the ceiling. But It was a lot of fun growing up in those days. Had plenty of dogs and cats to play with, and neighbors, and Joel Clark was one of my closest neighbors. The Mills boys, they were pretty close. And but it wasn't like growing up in town, for sure. And Jack mentioned about getting the grease from the bear. There's nothing wrong with bear meat, it's good. But we used like lard from the hogs and all, lard and everything that was cooked with some type of grease. Fried chicken, fried okra, everything. I grew up with all that good old-timey cooking now. It's a wonder I'm not 400 pounds instead of 2 something, 2 plus. But anyhow, does anybody have any questions? Jack?
The Turnbulls that are artists in the northern, up in Massachusetts and stuff, some of America's finest artists are Turnbulls. Is that the same book?
It has in this book that I've got right here. This book was done by Diane's sister, my sister-in-law, and her husband, with information that we had given her, going to all the cemeteries in this county, taking pictures of the graves and all. And then I had a great aunt named Ivy Turnbull, and she did a history of the Turnbull family back when they wrote letters. They wrote letters back and forth, and she compiled a lot of this information that my sister-in-law used to go in this book. And so if I've misstated something, it's my sister-in-law's fault. No, but she did a great job on this thing. I cannot loan it out because it's the only one I've got. I would loan it to somebody like Claudette or Cindy to make a copy of it, but I want my book back. And all 3 of my daughters have this same book. And then my children have the little children's storybooks about William O'Rule and all. So they've got that. But yes, there were some of the family that went to Massachusetts.
Where is that statue at?
Pardon me?
Where is that statue at? It's in Scotland. Where's the statue?
It's in Stirling, Scotland. Stirling, Scotland. Oh, and this is a picture of it. Sure. But like I said, I thought my grandmother was making this up. I thought this was just a family, something that had been passed down for years and all, but it turned out it was not. It turned out it was actually correct.
I heard something about another record, in addition to being state champions your senior year, something about circling this courthouse record.
Yeah, that's true. Now, back in those days, it was everybody wanted to break the record of how many times you could go around the courthouse without stopping until the city policeman or somebody ran you off. And at one time, I held a record with 110 times around the courthouse without stopping. And the last 3, I had to break the record. So the last 3, the city policeman was following me. I just carried him out on around 2 more times and then pulled off over here where Stewart Station is. But growing up in Monticello, it's funny. Back when I was young, Highway 90, I-10 was not here. Highway 90 and 19 were the 2 major thoroughfares. And they came right here to this courthouse. And we had more gas stations in Monticello, Florida than I think any other city in the world at one time. And people would come down from up north, and invariably, they'd go the wrong way around this courthouse. They'd go that way. Another thing too is they didn't know the difference between an apple and what those dang old, huh? Yeah, but the tongue nuts. This was a big area for raising tongue nuts because it was a major ingredient in paint at that time before they started with the synthetic paints. But they would invariably pick those things and eat them, and either died or got deathly sick from it. And there were big signs up everywhere: "Don't eat the tongue hole nuts. You know, they're poisonous."
I have one more question.
Okay, Jack.
The only person I know that can answer is my brother was married in Connell,
Right.
Ed Short. And that camp down there where y'all used to hunt and everything, when they kind of run out of something spirited to drink in the middle of the night, they'd get in the boat and go down to Nuttall Rise, so there was a good joint down there. Is that right?
That's before my time now.
Okay, good.
That was before my time. We always had plenty.
Figure out how they got back through those swamps in the dead of night.
Well, I wouldn't doubt it. I'll tell you one thing. You would be asleep in that camp, and all of a sudden you'd wake up and a paper bag would be rustling the paper bag, and then all of a sudden a gloop, 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 and then you hear that rustling the paper bag again, and then it'd be deathly quiet. But that was either Monroe Barrett or Ed Connell waking up during the middle of the night and reaching up under that mattress and pulling him out a bottle and taking him a drink and sticking it back under there. Well, guys, I certainly enjoyed being here. I hope I hadn't bored you. Cindy.
One question. Did you ever drive the courthouse backwards?
Yes. But I only did it. I did it backwards, but I don't think I ever held a record on that. I did it once or twice. Also climbed the water tower and got in trouble for it, but I wasn't there that night. I was not there. I had a date in Tallahassee. I was in Tallahassee. But Tom Arline, who's got the same initials, T.A., he climbed it that night, and he wrote T.A. and put a little 2 up there by it for both of us, even though I wasn't there. But I had a date, so I had an alibi right there. But I did not climb it that night, but we did numerous times before that.
What did you raise on your farm?
What we raised on the farm?
Watermelon?
We grew watermelons. We had cows. We had tobacco. Soybeans after I came along and started running the farm. Corn, that was our one of the big money crops was corn. But we also fed it to the cows and fed it to the hogs and all, so it was a multiple deal there, You had more than one use for corn. And also it baited ducks real good too. But I farmed pretty, and let me tell you one thing about when my daddy was growing watermelons. And every year we would take a vacation because Mama was teaching school, but she was off during the summer. And so it depended on how much Daddy had made on the watermelon crop as to what kind of vacation we had. If he made a pretty good crop and pretty good money in his pocket, we went to Canada, all the way up to Canada and back. One year we were going all the way to California, but for some reason they stopped in Las Vegas, and then the next day Daddy was ready to come home. They turned around and came back to Florida. I don't know what that was about. But my mother since she was a history buff and a history teacher and all, she had to stop at every historical marker, wherever we were going, even to go out of the way a couple miles. Now Daddy was fine with that on the way out, but on the way back, I think we made it back from Las Vegas to Monticello in about less than 2 days. If you had to go to the bathroom, you better do it right then. Get you a Coke and a pack of crackers, because he was headed home. He'd had enough of it. Jack, I appreciate y'all having me.
Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. Right.
And the nice part of this is David met